Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. Another win, no goals conceded. What is this? Let's dive in with two of my favourites, and I think your favourites too. Let's rock and roll, squaddies.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Happy Thursday to everyone. For those listening on Apple and Spotify and our audio platforms, wherever you find your audio listening, thank you for making us part of your day as well. Whether you're working out and listening or stuck in traffic, we appreciate you. Squaddies, welcome at ease. And welcome back to Squad Central as well, Mr. Harry Symeou and Senior Tom Canton. At ease, fellas.
Hello. How's it going?
It's going well. It's, yeah, it's good. How are you boys doing? Harry, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I was saying to you guys off air, I'm just trying to survive half term. One more day to go. Before it's the weekend, and they've got things to do at the weekend which will keep them occupied, and then it's back to school, and I cannot wait because trying to find something for them to do every single day in between working is just a nightmare. And yeah, I love them, but my god, they've driven me mad this week. So I can't wait for half term to be over. That's where I'm at.
Tom, not the same for you. By the way, I totally screwed up the background and don't know which one to use, but there is a title on the background which you can't see, but let's just ignore that right now. Tom, no sprogs for you, but you well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not the bastion of fatherhood that is Harry, but
I've never been called that before. Bloody hell.
But no, all good. Just very busy and working non-stop. So yeah, all good. I'm probably going to be working in the background of this. So see if you can notice.
Really? Look at you. At least you admit it. What is it? I heard your show. You weren't prepared at all for the fact you can't do a live show tomorrow and Saturday. So you're clutching at straws.
I've got a pre-record ready for tomorrow, and then I think I'm going to get some of the listeners to help me do a preview for the Burnley game to go out Saturday. So we'll have plans. Plans will be there. So yeah. It's just Harry.
Why does Harry's
now presenting?
Why is that? What is that about?
Maybe because I'm top left of the screen.
Yeah, maybe because you put in first. That might be it.
Oh, anyway, it doesn't matter. The title of the show is What is the Arsenal Matrix? And I've been thinking about this for a while. But before I do, real quick, a couple minutes each. Last night, beat Brighton. A big scare in the first half. I thought, oh no, here we go. The PTSD kicks in just a little bit. 10 changes. Very, I thought, ballsy from MIKEL Arteta. But unlike Liverpool, he still kept some experienced players in the side. Tom, we get through to the quarterfinal. Crystal Palace next. Some good performances. You weren't too impressed with Norgard. What's your quick assessment for the squaddies?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm a little bit surprised we went through, and with kind of a 2-0 scoreline as well, because the lineup that was selected, and I said to the listeners on the show this morning, I was doing some maths with Sam Dean last night, and we worked out that Brighton's starting 11 was £18 million more expensive than Arsenal's, which kind of gives you a little bit of a context as to how strong each of the sides were that started the game. But in the end, we rode our luck a little bit at the beginning. Kepa, I thought, had a good start to the game and maintained that throughout. And I think it was in part because there's a lot of players who haven't played together. There was a lot of players who were playing in partnerships that haven't got really any at all experience of playing next to and with one another. And I think Norgard struggled somewhat. I think we would kind of ran through in terms of the midfields too easily at times, and he was a little bit sloppy in his passing, but he did grow into the game, certainly towards the second half. And there were some really bright performances from the likes of Dowman and Nwaneri in particular, and then Saka when he came on, of course, to get the winning goal. Timber, excellent run, of course, for the second goal as well to set it up. So overall, happy. I mean, if you're going to go through in the League Cup, doing so, having made 10 changes, is about the best you can possibly ask for.
Harry, do you have the same sentiments?
Yeah, I suppose when you make 10 changes, you're going to create some issues because you're relying on new relationships that haven't really developed yet. You're relying on players that haven't really played much this season. I didn't think that he was going to make 10 changes, if I'm honest with you. I thought that Big Gabby might start at the back. And I know that he obviously was touch and go for the Palace game at the weekend and ended up having to play 90 minutes in that one because of Saliba going off injured. But I felt like maybe throwing in Capier and Mosquera in as a central defensive pairing was a bit of a risk for the first time. And I thought that Bukayo Saka would start on the right-hand side with a view to maybe only playing an hour or so. I also thought that Mikel Merino would go up front. I didn't expect Harry Menounos to be in the side. So, credit to Mikel Arteta because he rolled the dice, he gambled, but it paid off. And in the end, when you gamble like that and it does pay off, you essentially have the best possible outcome because he's basically gone through to the next round. His team have kept another clean sheet somehow. And on top of that, his key players mostly have been protected with the exception of 3 or 4 that only had to play a maximum of 20 minutes. So I think it's the best possible outcome. And sometimes you're going to take those gambles and they're going to work. And when they do, it's genius. And when they don't, it's easy with hindsight to go, you shouldn't have done that and you got it wrong. But I just think we're through. That's all that matters. The draw could have been worse for the next round. But we've just watched Crystal Palace come to the Emirates last weekend and give us problems. So don't be under any illusions. This is still a very, very difficult tie, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Crystal Palace are definitely one of the toughest teams that we've played. And of course, the photo I wanted to put up is not here. Was struggling to do that before the show started, but it was a huddle with Gabriel Heinze and the squad. And I just wanted to ask real quick because once again we walk away from a game and don't concede a goal. Nikola Jova, of course, has a lot to do with the strategy and what he's been able to do, and kind of really he and MIKEL trailblazers. We're going to get stuck into all of that, but I just wanted to ask you about Gabriel Heinze and the impact that you think he may have had, and what you hear behind the scenes, because in photos and videos, it comes across as the players respond to him and they, of course, have a great amount of respect for someone who's won a lot. But Tom, do you know or hear of anything of the impact that he's having that might be a bit of an X factor this season?
Yeah. I mean, I think Arteta was asked about Gabriel Heinze in one of his kind of recent press conferences, and he spoke about how the players have kind of grown completely enamored with him already, and those relationships have built really quickly. I think there was a lot of discussion around in pre-season what type of impact he would have, because from a coaching perspective, he hadn't had kind of as a head coach or a manager like the most successful of careers. And it seems that he is much more suited to working alongside, a manager or a head coach and working with other coaches and working perhaps more in closed analysis with fellow defenders. He's been doing a lot of work with the fullbacks, as you would expect from a former left back that he is. And he's been working in particular, I think, with Lewis Skelly on a lot of his deliveries and his passing and his end product. And I think, we saw obviously that on offer to a degree in the game on Wednesday night when he set up Waneri for the opening goal. But it's more so with his crossing that he's had an impact. So I'm only hearing good things, which isn't really a surprise when you ask people inside the club how things are going, because you would expect to. But he has, and you can see the evidence of that. I do love the huddles that he does specifically with all the defenders, those that are starting, those that aren't starting, just with the goalkeepers and defenders. I think that's quite a nice thing to have kind of generated, because it adds an extra layer of kind of unity, I think, between that group, and almost like the defensive unit is a family. Lewis Skelly was speaking after the game yesterday to media, and those quotes have come out now, where he spoke of how like clean sheets are seen as a mark of pride at the Emirates in particular. So, all of these things I think intertwine and work together, and Gabriel Heinze will be at the center of that for sure.
And Harry, your soundbite on him, because to me strikes me as, we're Greek and we have that little chip, that crazy chip in the back of our heads a lot of the times. And I like a little crazy to be involved in Mikel's setup, because, a lot of the times we've been talking about being nicey nice type of squad, but there's a bite to us now that I feel is a little bit different this season.
Yeah, and look, the defense is better than it's ever been. And for that reason, with Gabriel Heinze coming in the summer, you've got to give him some credit, right? You've got to assume that he's made some sort of difference. It's very, very difficult to know what that difference is like, or to kind of measure it, because we're not behind the scenes. We're not on the training ground. We know he's clearly a very, very passionate figure. He's obviously clearly very outspoken and all that stuff. And, you know, people seem to be responding really well to him. But I don't want to sit here and go on a monologue about Gabriel Heinze and the impact he's had, because I'd be just making it up. Like, that's the truth. I don't know. You know, and as Tom said, you know,
Greek mythology.
Yeah, a bit of mythology there. You know, if you ask around the club, you're going to get told positive things, right? That's the way it's going to be, and the way it should be. But, you know, I can't with any degree of certainty say he's done this or that, but clearly he's brought a bit of fire to the group, and for that reason, you know, along with the defense doing better, you have to give him some credit at least.
Fair enough. All right, let's get on to the main subject here. This is something that I've been noodling on for quite a while, and to give it some context as well, I think early on, you know, I used to have lots of arguments on this show about not being able to see MIKEL's path, not being able to see the blueprint of where he wanted to go. Kevin always used to say to me, it's the players, wait until he has his whole squad. And then you start seeing the evolution and the things that have happened on and off the pitch, the small details, you know, like the song, whether you like it or not, the taking away the tunnel, which I think was a genius idea, by the way. And then, you know, the players that they bring in, there's a lot more people involved in the evolution of Arsenal, but the revolution, I do think, belongs mostly to Mikel Arteta. And then you kind of lose the opportunity to win titles 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. This year, I feel at this point, there's something a little bit different. And the cattiness and the back and forth of Arsenal fans, I'm not sure if I'm seeing something that isn't there, but I wanted to talk to you guys about it, is I feel like there's a unity that is building among fans, because fans are waking up to what has been going on. And I truly feel like we've been living in the Matrix for a little while. And I've got some quotes, and we're going to do some analogies here and stuff like that from the film, which I think is one of the best films ever. And it's true that the Matrix is everywhere. It's all around us, everywhere now, even in this room. And this is all pertaining to Arsenal football, the pundits, the media, the narrative, right? I feel like this is where some fans, including myself, were a few years ago. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. I believe that there was a time where a lot of fans didn't want to accept, didn't want to believe, couldn't see the path forward. But then there was a group of fans that kind of moved on from that. But some fans kind of stayed in that bed, right? Because it was easier to just want to be right versus wrong. And there is even still to this day some deniers. But some fans, and I would say maybe you two fall into this bracket. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. To me, Mikel Arteta, and I know I'm going to get stick for this, and I don't really care, but for me, Mikel is Morpheus, right? And I think that I'm not saying that I was completely wrong about him, but I was definitely 90% wrong about him. I think that, you know, going down the line, he does have to show, just like Morpheus, like he could be a true hero in the end and win something for the Arsenal. But Tom, I want to start with you here, because there is, to me, this awakening that is going on right now, whether it's Arsenal fans going back and finding clips from 1905 on Jamie Carragher talking about set pieces, whether it's fans just really kind of, even if you weren't in the Mikel camp, defending the realm, if you like. Do you think I'm out of my mind crazy, or do you think that there's merit to this?
Yeah, I think it's potentially a combination of some people having finally realised in some ways what's going on. From my perspective, and kind of why I have adopted it, I feel like I adopted it a little bit for some time, to be fair. I think me and Harry have talked about it at length, you know, kind of how differently Arsenal can be discussed in comparison to others. And I know me and Sophie, you've had conversations about it as well. I think it's also a combination of fans just being fed up with how Arsenal are spoken about. particularly in the context of when they're in a really strong position at times. You know, they haven't won the league in these 3 seasons, but they've spent a lot of time at the top of the table. And even when they've been at the top of the table, as they are now, it still feels like Arsenal appear to be the butt of the joke. They still seem to be the team that get focused on and talked about negatively. They are assessed in a way in which no other team is assessed. The BBC Match of the Day Twitter account put out a table of what it would look like if there were no open goals, no set piece goals counting this season. It's like, let's have a look. If you take 11 goals away from the team that are top and where they sit, turns out it's only 3 points off the top, even without 11 of them. But I did a quick search. They'd never, ever tweeted a table out of that ilk ever before in a 14-year existence, a 220,000 post plus account. Like, it's mad. I think people fact-checked Sky Sports' graphic that they put up where they claimed that Arsenal were sitting in 17th for number of open play goals scored. And apparently it turns out Arsenal were 13th, not 17th for that. And it's not amazingly higher, but it's still, 17th is one place above the bottom 3 in the context of Premier League standing. So I think it is a case of people just being fed up now. I did a piece the other day that got quite a lot of attention about this idea, which is my honest opinion, that if neither of City and or Liverpool win the title this season, I think that goes down as a massive failure. Now, I didn't do that to kind of spark a reaction. Certainly, it did spark a reaction, and there was an inevitability that it would, especially when you have anything to say about Liverpool in a negative context, because while City don't really have kind of as much of an engaged fan base, Liverpool certainly do. And any kind of mention of them, or it turns out any mention of even us, can spark, hundreds and thousands of responses from Liverpool supporters as well. And I'm sure that Arsenal fans are the same. It's probably fair to say. And I think that it was the idea of just bringing those two into the light more, and bringing this idea that it's not, Arsenal are currently top. We've 9 games played. They've opened a 6-point gap to City, a 7-point gap to Liverpool. And yet we're the ones being talked about, not the team that at that point lost their last 4 league games. They've now lost 6 of their last 7 games. Not the fact that City had dropped points in key moments as well, and we're already lagging behind after just 9 games. The focus is on Arsenal. And it just, for me, just seems so disingenuous that the Arsenal are the team in focus, when it should be the teams that are not performing as they should, rather than us in a critical light.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Chad Malone says here, Harry, it's fascinating to watch the general discussion about set pieces and Arsenal being boring. What they mean is Arsenal lack of jeopardy is boring to rivals, and our ability to beat the low block. I think, Harry, it all starts with our defence. And I couldn't fit Ben White on this photo for those listening on audio, but there is a photo of Ben White and some of the finishers as well. Because, like, when you think about what Tom just said, imagine kind of playing the way Arsenal are playing and conceding 0 goals in however many games, and the narrative continues. They're still trying to find something, whereas MIKEL has slowly gone on and kind of built, his team totally around defense. But how do you feel about the whole kind of concept and narrative and blue pill, red pill narrative changing and Arsenal fans rising?
I think that people are entitled to have different opinions, and, you're going to get some people that agree with certain things and others that don't, and that's absolutely fine. But what I think has finally kind of dropped in terms of sort of people waking up across the board is that the division between Arsenal fans that you've seen for such a long time is exactly why we are spoken about in that way. If there wasn't that divide, like, I'm no Liverpool fan, but they normally rally together. They normally stick together. And so it's harder to create these kind of narratives and then divide when talking about them than it has been in recent years with Arsenal. It's a fan base that, yes, has a lot of, what I would say about Arsenal's fan base, we've got so many amazing content creators, and there's so many different opinions and views out there that every opinion has sort of amplification. And that means that you can create debates and engagement, and whatever you say gets amplified and spread right across the kind of web. So I feel like if you are Sky, if you are BBC, whoever, it's easy to create these narratives around Arsenal, and you know that all you need to do is like the match and the rest will take care of itself. And I feel like what's happened in the last few months, because the results are good, and ultimately that's where it all stems from. If the results are good and everybody's happy, you feel certainly more passionate, don't you, about defending your club. And there'll be people that put their head above the parapet anyway and still defend their club regardless. And there'll be others that will take a step back and go, do you know what? They've got a point. And then that starts to kind of infiltrate your thinking. So I think what's happened this year is because the results are good, because we are in a strong position, and because it's undeniable that right now we are the favourites to win the Premier League, and we haven't done it yet, but we're the favourites. I think now people are going, hold on a minute, well, you're still criticising us. So there must be something wrong here. And actually, this run has been really helpful, I think, in just uniting people and getting everybody singing off the same hymn sheet and opening people's eyes to the way that we've been spoken about as a football club. And listen, there's some truth in the criticism. There always is. There's no smoke without fire. But, you know, there comes a point where it becomes silly. And I think we've all sort of gathered together now to accept that that's kind of where we are in terms of the narratives around Arsenal. And it can't go on any longer.
Tom, it is only 9 games in, and it really scares me personally to feel what I'm feeling. But one of the lines from the film is you have to let it go, fear, doubt, and disbelief, free your mind. Now, I don't care so much about me feeling this, but what I do care about is our players feeling it. And I think that's what feels different this year. So if you go from the defense to, you know, the midfield, and another line is don't think you are, know you are. And then, you know, the attack, you know, the line from the film, guns, lots of guns. I feel like we have so much Arsenal, forgive the pun, to really be the difference maker, you know, this season. And then you look at our goalkeepers, just Kepa last night, who I thought was man of the match. Just, you know, everyone poo-pooed that 5 million signing. And then you look at the bench and also a little bit of the dark arts and the shithousery and in Ben White and what Kai Havertz has brought to the team. I feel like the belief is different and the mentality is different. But I fear for what the mentality will look like, say, in March, April. And that, for me, is the biggest hump for Arsenal to overcome, because we know we're talented. We know we can keep clean sheets. We know we can beat teams. But for me, the mental is the part of it. But I do feel like there's this free your mind attitude, and that starts with MIKEL. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think any title winner has had to effectively had the ability to shut the noise out, to shut the expectation out, to block the pressure, to deal with every kind of external factor that comes alongside it. You don't win a title unless you can do that. Even the teams that have kind of in the end coasted towards a title win, they were always on the same points at some stage as their rivals at one stage of that season, because you all start on 0. So it has to be within this team's mindset and mentality to be able to shut out that noise. Now, there's an irony to this, because you've got people like myself and Harry who have the job of kind of asking questions to the coaches and trying to get, you know, answers and get insight from them. And it's almost like there's this weird sense at the moment with how well Arsenal are doing that there's almost kind of a mental block even in the press room, because it's like, what is there? What questions do you ask this week when things are going so well? It's easy to ask questions when things go badly, because there's so many things to talk about in terms of why did this go wrong? What can you do better? What are the solutions? What needs to change? Do you need to change?
Sorry, Tom, you also get criticized for not asking tough enough questions from fans and fellow YouTubers and media as well.
Or picking up on things during press conferences, like when MIKEL makes a mistake. And people are like, he made that mistake. Why don't you pull him up? Because I'm live blogging. I can't Google something mid presser and then be like, MIKEL, you got that wrong. It just doesn't work.
After your turn to ask a question has passed.
After you've already asked it, it's you've already got your 2 questions or 1 question or however many questions you get planned. Like
I don't think people realize how hard it is to just decide what question you're going to ask, and sometimes what you've prepared for can change based on what MIKEL is saying. depending
Someone
on
else
whether you
might
go.
steal your question as well. Someone
That's
else might
the
ask
worst
what you were
part.
going to ask. Oh, it's
Yeah.
horrible when that happens. You're like,
Yeah.
I've got this great question that I've thought of, and somebody like, Harry will go and nick it or something. So, so it's one of those moments where, that mindset, the mentality of the team. Like what I asked MIKEL the other day about that Granit Xhaka quote about when Arsenal do something, everyone has to say something. Well, Mika Richards said it, and then Granit Xhaka kind of quoted him, and some people thought I was like trying to set Arteta up with that question, because I saw it on like haters like posted a little like clip of it, and I read through some of the comments, and some of them were like, this journalist trying to catch. I was like, I'm not trying to catch MIKEL out. I'm trying to like get into the mindset of is that how he sees it too? Because it's never really been put to him in that way before, about this idea that do they view it in the sense that Arsenal are kind of talked about differently. And I thought what was really interesting about his answer is he started off the answer how I thought he was going to start it off, which was to be like, I don't know, I don't think. And then he stopped and he was like, I don't. And then he went, well, actually, it is true, because we're Arsenal and we're a massive club. And, the noise around Arsenal is always going to be loud. And then he ended the monologue by saying, I hope that we're talked about for the positive noise and for the, the things that we do well, rather than obviously things that are being scrutinized. So if anyone who doesn't think that MIKEL is switched on or fully aware of things, or isn't clever in how he answers some questions, or when sometimes you'll ask him a question and the answer that you might get, and you're thinking, I thought he would have known that. The reality is he probably does. That he's a very clever guy. You don't get to be in the position that he's in. You don't earn the amount of that money that he earns without being a very clever guy. So he knows that the mentality side of things for Arsenal is critical, and I think he's also signed players that have that bracket and that experience to deal with it too.
I also think, like, at the moment, just on that point about the mentality, because in the past, right, when we've sort of been criticized for certain things, I suppose that deep down, some of the players would have looked at some of that criticism and gone, do you know what? I might not fully agree with it, but there is some semblance of truth to that. Like, there is an angle from which you could come at that point and make it. Whereas now it's like we're top of the league, we're extending our lead, or we've just extended our lead again for the second time in a really short period of time. And you're still criticizing us. And almost that, in a way, does Mikel Arteta's job for him. Because now you develop that siege mentality, but that's because everybody else is talking about you in unfavorable terms. And if you are achieving the results that Arsenal are, you're doing it without key players like Arsenal are. You're not giving anything up like Arsenal are. You're sort of sitting there on the training ground on a Monday going, what the hell more can we do? And so it leads you to see and open your eyes to the fact that the criticism is unfair. And that, by nature, I think, creates a bond and a unity. And that effect has also taken place in the supporters as well, and within the fan bases. And on Tom's point about the press conferences, absolutely, like, there's a lot of people that comment a lot about press conferences that have never been to one in their lives. And that's fine. But you're presuming to understand something that you just don't understand. And I guarantee if you were in that position with one question to ask, I mean, I get stick for not asking questions in press conferences that I don't even go to. Like I miss 90% of the pre-match press conferences going into a weekend because I work on a Friday and I can't go. But I just, it's funny, like that stuff. And that's where, I've got no problem with people saying you should ask this or you should ask that, or I would have preferred that you ask this or ask that. Fine. That's absolutely fine. No problem. But it's when people go, oh, Mikel Arteta handpicked the people that are in there and all that. It's all a load of nonsense. And if you knew how it worked, you'd understand.
It's so funny when you see those theories about how presses work. You're just like, what?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really crazy because I've been on both sides. So as a PR in the entertainment industry for many years, kind of managed the press conferences and picking who asks questions. And then on the other side where you ask the questions. And I just think I would love to. I was talking to Andrew. Maybe you guys can hop on it too, because Andrew, aka Askblog, we were talking about this. And we said, maybe we'll do a show on it just so people can truly like understand how it all works. And you can't be kamikaze. And I mean, this is why in some respect, when the tours are going on, I like Curtis from AFTV will be like, why aren't you signing X player, or why aren't you doing this? Now, there's a difference and a point of difference in your audience as well. What your audience wants to know versus what you can ask are two different things. And I asked Emery like a point blank question about, Koscielny when he went AWOL, and, the staff didn't really appreciate it. I asked a question about Ashburton Army at the time, and MIKEL answered it, but the staff weren't particularly happy with me that I asked that question. And I know that
you troublemaker.
Yeah, horrendous behavior.
But I also feel like there is this truth to when you're there every single presser, it is a little bit different. How you manage that process for yourself and your outlet. And that's the truth. I'm not saying you're afraid to ask questions. I thought James Gunner Blog asked a really tough question regarding an ex-midfield player of ours. So
and he's been in other press conferences since then. So
yes, he has.
He's not banned. No,
he's not banned.
He's not banned. He's not banned.
Yeah.
All right. I've got 10 minutes left with these boys. One's catching a train, and I think the other one is probably pre-recording the shows that he's not supposed to.
Mega schedule. I've got some broccoli pasta to cook and then record a podcast. So it is what it is.
And watch Traitors.
And watch Traitors tonight. 100%.
Did you see last night's one, Tom? Fantastic.
I'm always conscious of people who haven't seen it because I won't spoil it. Alex Howe somehow had gone till Saturday without even seeing the episode. I was like, how? I watched it yesterday on the way home from the game, the last episode. But yeah.
So I'm going to start a show, Casual Fridays, where I think this type of thing, our listeners love listening to what you watch and what you listen to and what you eat, and no football. It's like the no football show. Could you go through an entire show and not mention football? I don't know. That's a little bit tough. This is funny. Mark says Harry's the reason we got beaten by PSG last season for not seeing.
If you do those Casual Fridays, we will explain that story to you.
Okay. I wanted to put this quote up. Sooner or later, you're going to realize, just as I did, that there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And for me, this is an interesting juxtaposition for MIKEL because he knows the path. The pain of the last 3 years not winning, and so do some of our players. Of course, we have new players now who have come in that can bring in a different culture and mentality as well. Players who've kind of hit the ground running, like Mosquera. I thought in Capier, it was really nice to see him yesterday. Zubimendi, for me, who quietly is probably, along with Timber, our player of the season. David Raya, who's just, talk about eat my words on that. I'll say every single time I mention his name. And we are doing it without Odegaard. We are doing it without Kai Havertz, and Kai, of course, who's won at the highest level in Europe. Madueke as well. We're doing it without him. Tom, MIKEL's walked the path of losing. It's known the path of losing, but he hasn't walked the path of winning. What do you think that means this season?
I don't know if this sounds weird. It's genuinely my belief that Mikel Arteta isn't the reason that we didn't win the title in the last 3 seasons. Like, if you look at the last 3 seasons in a row, I don't think you can pinpoint Arteta as being the reason why we didn't win those leagues. And obviously, having won the FA Cup in his first season, his critics like to say it was done with Emery's team. To me, that's more in Arteta's credit than against him, that he won it with that fractured group that needed to be replaced for Arsenal to progress as well. And while he's certainly contributed in a sense, and there have been mistakes that he has made that have been, certainly smatterings throughout those last 3 seasons, there are bigger powers at work that for me were why Arsenal didn't win those leagues. So for me, it's not like I saw those seasons and thought, we don't know if he's got the mindset of a Premier League winning manager. Because if anything, I think in those seasons, especially 22-23, shocked everybody. Like, we were meant to go for Champions League qualification, not a title. In 23-4, we ended the season with more wins than the Invincibles, more goals scored than the Invincibles, and just finished 2 points, off that title. and most seasons that tally would win you a league. It's just so unfortunate that City just happened to be 2 points better than us, and it was mad that end of kind of second half of the season run both teams had. And then, of course, you got last season, where I personally feel, as a manager, that was his most impressive season last season, of how he managed the squad to a second place finish and 2 cup semi-finals, particularly in the Champions League, battering the reigning European champions at that time, Real Madrid 5-1, with MIKEL Merino as his centre forward, and then having lost Gabriel for the last however many months of the season. So I think that Arteta, despite not having the evidence of that trophy that we're all kind of looking and hoping we can win, and this season, if we don't win it, frankly, it would be a massive disappointment and a failure, certainly if we don't. I don't think there's much debate about that. I think that what we have seen from this team and this manager in these last 3 years is plenty of evidence that Arsenal can do that and can achieve that. It's just, unfortunately, I don't feel the cards have fallen, as they sometimes need to do for a title winner, in Arsenal's favour. And I'm sincerely hoping that we're starting to see those cards and those dominoes, if you like, to lead to May, are falling in the right way for us this time around. And Arteta as a protagonist and catalyst for that, for me.
Harry, do you think the knowing and walking the path may have a difference this year because of Andrea Berta? Obviously, Josh Kroenke's put his money where his mouth, or his support where his mouth is. Do you think it's different because of also the culture that Berta brought in? He was kind of like my last line here, in the sense that you've built the squad, you've got the players, you had the foundation for the last, 3 or 4 years. But also kind of his mentality and him knowing the path from success at Atletico Madrid makes that difference? Or is it still, at the end of the day, MIKEL is the manager on the sideline and the players cross that white line?
I think it's all about consistency. And I think Arsenal have been incredibly consistent over the last few years, but they've not always had that X factor to get over the line. And last season, I know we were riddled with injuries, but I might argue that I still don't think in attack we had what was necessary to go on and win a Premier League, whether those players stayed fit or not. I can't know that for sure, but I just never had that feeling of confidence in our attacking unit as I do now, because of the options that we have. And obviously we've started this season and we've got no Havertz, we've got no Odegaard, we've had Saka missing, Martinelli's out now. So we've had it tough again at the start of this season. But I think it's about consistency. It's very, very difficult to maintain such a high level of performance over the course of 3 or 4 seasons. And I just think that the law of averages says that if you manage to maintain that level over the course of that period of time, you will at some point be the best team. And so if we go on and win the Premier League this season, we'll all look back to what we did in the summer. We'll all look back to the influence that Andrea Berta's had, the players that have come in, etc., etc. And all of that is right, because all of those are contributing factors. But where Arteta deserves credit is that he's kept the standard at a certain level, which means that at the very minimum, for the last 3 years, we've been in the mix. And you can't win if you're not in the mix. So, yes, the summer signings, I think, will be difference makers and will be essentially, if we do get over the line, what's tipped us over it. But at the same time, I think the foundation of consistency is why we are in such a great place. And even though we didn't win the league last year and we didn't win the league the year before, I think a lot of people realized that that standard had risen so high in comparison to where it was before, and that MIKEL Arteta had been a massive part of raising that bar, that they were reluctant to be critical of him and reluctant to point the finger at him and say, that's why we didn't win the league. As a manager and as a coach, I really do believe that your job is to create a standard and an environment in which your team can go on and achieve what they need to. But at some point, it's on the guys that are on the pitch. There's only so much you can control. And I, in the past, have said that I think MIKEL Arteta controls too much. And that I thought at times that had maybe taken away some of the spontaneity of our attacking and creative players. But I look at it now and I think he's created that, sort of framework, if you like. Now you've got to go get over the line. And it's on players like Saka and Odegaard when he returns, and Gyökeres and Martinelli and Trossard to produce those moments, and Eza. And if they do, we'll be absolutely fine, because our sort of our sort of ceiling is very high. Of course, we haven't hit that ceiling yet because we haven't won anything. But also our base level is incredibly high and much higher than it's ever been. And because of that, we've been able to stay in the race, in the conversation. And if we do have a season where Liverpool fall off a bit and Man City fall off a bit, people will say that that's the only reason we won the league. It won't be the only reason, but it'll be the fact that we managed to remain consistent even during times where other clubs found it difficult, that will ultimately be the difference. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I did a show a couple of weeks ago. Consistency is king. Consistency and mentality for me are the difference makers. Like I said at the top of the show, there's no doubt that we have the talent. Now I know that you both have to duck out. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes. Harry's got to catch a train.
I've got another 5 minutes if you want, Soph. I can
give you one more monologue if you like and shoot.
One more monologue. Well, look, why don't I leave it to you guys then? Because the last line I wanted to kind of share was, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the matrix is telling my brain that it's juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss. And I kind of put that picture up of Josh and MIKEL and Andrea Berta because there was a lot of time, our fan base felt like maybe the Cronkies were ignorant, but there's an ignorance that is offensive and foul. And there's an ignorance where you just are so determined on what your end goal is and what the path is that you have to be ignorant to the noise going on the outside, Tom. And I don't know if you think that's fair or foul, but that ignorance now, I think, has been proven to be something that, was the right decision. Given MIKEL Arteta a contract, we were bottom of the table after 3 losses with 0-0-0 on the table, sticking by him and stuff. Would you agree with that a little?
Yeah, I think that Arteta is a lot more plugged into the outside world than perhaps maybe those that are the biggest decision makers, like Josh, for instance. I do think that Arteta, despite some of his answers in presses where he kind of says, "I've not heard this," or sometimes it turns out he has, and he'll kind of contradict himself with some answers. I remember the Madueke situation, for instance, was a good example of when kind of before he said he hadn't really seen it, and then he spoke about how he kind of spoken to Madueke on the phone about it and discussed it, and stuff like that. So there are times where I think Arteta is plugged in, but from an ownership and a hierarchy standpoint and an executive standpoint, they've just assessed the reality of Arsenal's situation, which is pre-Arteta, the kind of during Arteta period, and now present Arteta. And the reality that they see as owners of a football club is a club that were in the wilderness and something of a sleeping giant when he arrived. So a manager now that has taken Arsenal in combination with work, of course, beyond just him, and that counts in Andrea Berta this year, of course, as well, and some of the work that Edu did, and some of the work that some of the other hierarchies did, and Tim Lewis's involvement, and of course, Richard Garlick and Vinay Venkatesham, and even at the start, Raul Sanyehi to a slight degree, not particularly great, but certainly there were some things he was involved in, like the Gabriel transfer that we have to look at and say, Gabriel is now, what he is. So you have to give some credit, even in the smallest terms. I think that where Arsenal are now is that they know that they are just a force, and this kind of unstoppable force that doesn't need to worry about everything else. They can just do what they do. They can just play the game they play. They can let the people do the talking, and they'll let their own football do the talking. And that's what they've done this season. And that's what they'll continue to do going forwards. And every time you speak to a player, every time you speak to the manager, the message is always the same. And that's that they focus on themselves. They have such belief in what they're doing, such pride in what they're doing, particularly defensively. They thrive on the fact that they are so... they instill so much fear in opposition sides whenever they take a corner. And I think they thrive on that environment of kind of building up the tension by slowing down the game before a corner kick is taken. It's always something to look out for in how they slow it down in those moments. And I just think from that point of view, ignorance is bliss for Arsenal. But I think they are more switched on than maybe people give them credit for. But I think that they're switched on in the right way, and they're ignorant in the right way. And that really benefits them. But I'm Harry does out now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll get Harry's go, and then Harry will give his closing, and then we'll close. Cool. Harry, thanks, Tom. Thanks, mate. You know where to follow Tom. I'll let them know again, Tom, just in case they've been living under a rock. Harry, does any of it matter if we don't win the title? Do you think it's going to be the worst title loss ever? Like, how would you like to close that?
The stronger your position gets, and our position has strengthened over the last few weeks, the more pressure there is. But obviously, the task becomes easier as well. So it's kind of a trade-off, isn't it? When you get into a position where you've got a great advantage, you're in a really good place, in a good position. And so in theory, your task is easier. But of course, with that expectation comes pressure, and people will be on you and all over you like a cheap suit if you don't achieve what you set out to achieve. So look, if we don't win, I'm going to be bitterly, bitterly disappointed. And I'm sure many other Arsenal fans at the end are going to look at it and go, okay, let's try and figure out what went wrong. What's my interpretation of events? Because this is the first time that I expect us to win it rather than I'm hoping we win it. And that's the shift for me this season. And that shift was in part because of the transfer window. We addressed every single area that we needed to. I think the jury's still out on some of the players that we brought in as to whether or not over the course of the season they're going to be good enough. And that's my one fear. Like, there's a few players in there that I'm still not sure what I'm going to get from them. So it's not to give them stick or to criticize them, but Victor Gyökeres, for instance. So if I don't know how many goals we're going to get out of him, I knew we weren't going to get 40 like he scored last season, but I wasn't sure how that number was going to translate to English football. So I'm a little bit on the fence about that. I'm on the
you think
fence.
he's made a difference though, Harry, already
100%.
with how we, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I do think he's made a difference. It's not to diminish his role, but my point is that I'm still unsure about what the output's going to look like from some of these players. I'm still unsure what the output's going to look like from Eze. I'm unsure what the output's going to look like from a number of players. You know, Trossard's had a decent start to the season. Martinelli's had a better start to the season than I was expecting. So if you've got the level of depth that we do, then there will be players whose numbers essentially provide cover to those who may be slightly underachieved. So just because you don't know what you're going to expect or you expect something less, it doesn't mean that you should write the team off. But there's still some uncertainties for me. And that's why I'm not at the point where I'm going, we're going to win the league after just 9 games. I think that's a bit knee-jerk.
I agree with that.
But at the same time, all the tools are there. All the tools are there. So as I say, I'm expecting it rather than hoping for it now. And that's the big difference. And if we don't win it, then I am going to sit and I'm going to look back at the season and I'm going to say, why, in my opinion, didn't we win it? Who's responsible for those things? And, you know, if it comes down to the manager, I'm not afraid to say I think the manager got X, Y, and Z wrong. But I'm also not going to sit there and say from now that if he doesn't win it, I would sack him, because it totally depends on how all of that unfolds and what the context is. And context is really, really important, because if you look back at last season, Arsenal finished second in the league, 2 cup semi-finals. You'd say the semi-finals are a decent achievement, especially the Champions League one. Second in the league is something we could have only dreamed of a few years ago, so we should take it. But the context is that we've been knocking on the door of winning the title for a number of years and we fell short. Another bit of context is that we had tons and tons of injuries and that made a difference. So without all of that evidence and without doing that proper analysis, I think it's very, very difficult to draw conclusions. But as I say, I'll finish off on this. For me, there's an expectation now rather than a hope. That's the big shift. That's the big difference. And let's hope that that expectation doesn't weigh too heavy over the course of what remains of the season, because there's still a long way to go and there's plenty of potential banana skins ahead.
I agree with you, Harry. Totally agree with you. 9 games in, it was 4 games ago, everyone was saying it was Liverpool's title and we were out of it. I just think you have to be really careful. Right, go grab your train and enjoy your night. And thank you, Harry, for joining. I will let everyone know where they can find you. Of course, it's at Harry Symeou, the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Look out for him on YouTube and all the social platforms, posting great content. Thank you, Harry. I'm going to let you go and I'm going to wrap things up. Take care, mate. Okay, Harry and Tom, thanks to them. Thanks to you guys also for tuning in. I wanted to do something a little bit different today. And I think when you go deep into the rabbit hole and the Arsenal matrix, and I hear what Harry's saying about Gyökeres, but I also hear what MIKEL Arteta's saying about Gyökeres and the value that he's brought to the team already. But when you think about Kai Havertz being able to come back and having him in the toolbox, you know, you go deep into the Arsenal rabbit hole and it's squad depth. The squad depth this season is going to be able to maybe propel us to the promised land. And like Harry said, if it doesn't, the expectations are higher this season. Therefore, the disappointment will be greater than the previous 3 seasons. But you've got Trossard scoring important goals. You've got Odegaard to come back as well. You've got Madueke to come back. You've got a goalkeeper in Raya and a backup goalkeeper who's proving their 5 million worth. You've got, you know, an interesting attack. I agree about Eze. I want to see more from him, even though he's had 2 really big moments, the Man City Crystal Palace game. The stuff in between from Eze so far has been a little bit disappointing. But Rebecca Lowe did talk to us about that he can dip in and out, but he'll come up big. And just like Trossard, does it matter about the stuff in between if he comes at the right time and makes up for, you know, maybe not playing particularly well for 90 plus minutes with one big moment in a game? I'm not sure. I think that it matters that he's there for the big moments, because you need moments from players who do have quiet games. We've seen Trossard do that as well. The defense, Yuri and Timber, along with, I think, Zubimendi, probably our best players so far this season. Big Gabby as well. Saliba, when he's not the one you're talking about at the back, that's quite incredible. Calafiori, showing that when he's fit, you know, the benefit to the team and the impact that he has. And his organized chaos has been quite impressive, you know, this season. Showing a picture now of Declan Rice and Zubimendi building up a rapport and a partnership that is really just become kind of like the nucleus, the engine of this team, and the way that they also protect that back line. There's a symphony and synchronicity between the defense and the midfield. Mosquera has just been so impressive, and Capier looked good last night. You know, then the youngsters, Waneri, I thought he had a poor first half. I thought he was cheap with the ball, gave the ball away against Brighton, didn't play particularly well, comes up with a big goal and a big moment. And that will give him every confidence. I think the problem for Waneri a little bit, guys, is that you're seeing Dowman, who is this sizzling starlet X Factor, shining bright from like space. It's like light years where you see a star that's a billion freaking miles away. And, you know, they're coming through at the same time. I hope this isn't going to be an Emile Smith-Rowe Saka moment. I really hope Waneri isn't going to be the Emile Smith-Rowe. And confidence is key for him. Getting a run in the side is important for him. But he needs to be better with his distribution and his decision-making with the ball. And I actually think Dowman last night should have made better passes at points. But what he does with the ball, the way he dribbles, the speed of which he dribbles when he has the control, it's insane. You could see the difference in the talent. I think Waneri's a super talented player. But he's going to have to evolve his off the ball play as well if he wants to make it in this MIKEL Arteta team. I know everyone now is going to be screaming for Dowman to be playing. And when you see kind of like the Highlanders last night, and Tom said it, like the academy and the players coming through, it's really quite incredible what we're doing at that grassroots level for the club. So there's a lot to be excited about. And this is a big season for MIKEL Arteta. And there's no doubt that, you know, this is the moment, this is the time. And hopefully it will be our time. Thank you all for tuning in and for listening. Lots of thanks for Harry and Tom. Let's put those up on the screen. For those listening on our audio platform, hope you appreciate the show as well. It has been a pleasure talking football with these guys, and we'll continue this conversation. And by the way, I just wanted to say a huge thank you. The inspiration for this show today came from an image that I saw online. And that is Mr. Matt Scott. And please go give Matt a follow, Matt at Matt5Scott. Should have mentioned this at the top of the show, but I was too excited to get into the conversation. But Matt did this picture of MIKEL Arteta. as a Neo. Maybe it was Morpheus. To me, MIKEL is Morpheus and the squad are Neo. And I just wanted to say thank you to Matt for letting me use the photo and for inspiring what I was thinking about just in life in general. Am I living in the Matrix right now? But appreciate you, Matt, and thank you so much for being kind in lending us your image. It's brilliant. And I just think that right now, MIKEL is operating on a level that is exceptionally inspiring for the squad and for me as a fan as well. Of course, he has to back it up with, winning at the end of the season. But if you lose in a glorious manner, does that make things different too? You guys can let me know in the YouTube comments. Definitely, have your voice heard in our football democracy. We'll carry on this conversation too, because there's a rabbit hole and always a deeper dive when it comes to Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, and our fan base as a whole. I think that right now, uniting, being together, proving people wrong is the way to go. This is the Arsenal fan kind of base that I grew up with. Win, lose or draw, we stuck together. And there was not noise and chaos because there really wasn't social media at that time. So to see us uniting and fighting against the stupid, obnoxious, irrelevant narrative when we're in the position we are, this is why long may it continue. And Harry's comment and the show we did a couple of weeks ago about consistency being king. Don't let your guard down. Don't get too cocky. Don't get too confident. Stay the path, stay the course. Know the path, walk the path. And I think, if we do those things and stay fundamentally sound from a mental perspective, we should be just fine. Appreciate each and every one of you listening. Thank you to those who have made us part of your day. If you're listening on replay, don't forget what our Chief Like Officer Tammy Steele says. Hit that like button. We're slowly crawling on the way to 20K. Of course, there's been less shows over the last few weeks, and keep those messages coming. Appreciate each and every one of you. I will be back live and we'll let you know over the weekend. What day is it today? Thursday. We're playing Burnley. We'll see if we're going to do a post-game show, but got some great guests coming up. Adrian Clark, you asked for him. Adrian Clark will be with us next week. So look out for that. Keep looking on the YouTube community page, which is now called Posts. Thank you again, guys. At ease. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. Thank you to Tom and Harry. Have a great rest of your night. And of course, let's hope for 3 points this weekend as well.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
I like it when someone says interesting show. That's good. Thanks for all the messages, you guys. See you soon. Where's the end stream? Right there.